Hey there, good people of the world. Big Heavy, wishing you a happy new year, and wanted to share my journey on a Joe Rogan style sober October just in January. Which, yes, it's a little bit weird, but a few things driving that. So, first of all, I've basically gotten too fat. If you saw my little New Year's short, I kind of ran through it. Basically, I have kind of three criteria that alert me to the fact that I'm getting a little bit outside of my fighting weight. The first is when I start to have a little trouble getting my socks on in the morning, and it's obviously not impossible for me to do so. But that kind of clues me into the fact that hey, things are getting a little bit out of control. Second thing that kind of clues me in, I have like 100 kilogram benchmark for myself, and have traveled and lived in places where the scale is in metric. 100 is kind of a nice round number. It's about 222 or 220.2 pounds or so in the imperial system. That's kind of at the top edge of my healthy weight range. So that's kind of another red flag that's been going off. And then probably the worst one for me is you start to develop a rare medical condition called Dicky-Do. If you haven't heard of that, that's when your belly starts to hang over more than, well, you can figure that out. So all those alarm bells were going off for me, and the way I'm wired is I need to make a dramatic change. I need to have a program with goals, with objectives, with measurements, with all that stuff. I'm not somebody that can go and kind of follow this life hack trend where you make some little tiny incremental change and you do one little tiny thing and over the course of a year it adds up. Generally, I sort of slip into bad habits over the course of the year, and those compound to set off my 3 alarm bells. The best technique I have for mitigating those types of situations is to just go after something with a dramatic and overly ridiculous plan. And this January, I decided to take Joe Rogan's most recent Sober October with a few adaptations. So rules are pretty simple. And, I'm taking the first 3 topics directly from Rogan. That's obviously getting rid of booze for an entire month. I had my last drink at about 11:59 on December 31st. So that one's checked off. Second one is doing some form of exercise every day that burns at least 500 calories. And then the third is Rogan did 100 push-ups each day. I have the upper body strength of a small female T-Rex, so I'm sticking with 25 and hopefully working on from there. I've also added a few elements. So the first is I'm going to do the same number of cat-cows, kind of a yoga-y pose, as the push-ups I do each day. And that's because I have a bit of a weak back. When did you figure that out? About a week back. I'm also adjusting my eating. This is an area where, I constantly struggle. I love the typical, garbage American diet. I would love to rock a cheeseburger, a brew, a pizza, all that stuff. And my wife is much more healthy and much more tuned into all that stuff. So rather than trying to force myself into something, she's following some program that all the cool ladies on the Facebooks and that sort of thing are doing. I think it's called E2M. I have no idea what it stands for, but basically the extent of my eating is to have her just tell me what to eat every day. So that's the eating element of it. Now I'm currently 2 days into this. You have the luxury of getting to see the results over the course of the next few minutes. I unfortunately have to wait the next 4 weeks, so we'll see how things look. Hopefully there will be some dramatic improvement. But in terms of how things are starting off, I will warn you, you're going to see some footage of me without a shirt on in the next segment. So, hide your wife, lock up your kids. I have been mistaken for a gorilla and or Sasquatch in the past. So I can warn you that it's a little bit ugly, but for the sake of science and sharing the journey, did want to subject you to that level of visual violence. I'll also note that despite my 100-kilo warning flag, I'm going to do everything in Imperial because I'm living in an Imperial world and I'm an Imperial girl. So here's my starting point. You can see my stats in there. I haven't been over 230 in a long time, so that was really a bit of a gut punch. I would attribute that to an overly, let's say, joyful December. I was doing the typical holiday activities. I'd kind of cut back on my workout routine. I was having, the post-skiing beer or 3. Obviously that added up. Obviously that did not help my appearance or my weight, and essentially it shows. So the starting point I think is ultimately a little bit over reality, but it is what it is. The scale doesn't lie, and we'll see how things go in subsequent weeks. So we got some work to do, and let's get after it, and I'll see you back here for week 2. Hey there, good people. Through the miracle of video, what was a couple or 3 seconds for you has been 7 days for me, and I'm back with the 1 week Sober October, just in January update. I'm going to throw some video up on the screen so you can see a side by side of my gut, which has hopefully gotten a little bit smaller, albeit just the same level of hairiness and overall rotundosity, which is a medical term in case you're unaware. I do weigh myself every single day, and there's two competing philosophies on that. I'm in the camp that if you weigh yourself every day, that helps you spot trends, it helps you spot a moving average. So your weight naturally is going to go up and down and bounce all over the place. By weighing yourself every day, you kind of separate the signal from that day-to-day variable noise. So here's how things look in happy scale. So my low was a couple days ago, 221. My starting point was, I think, like 231 or something. So you can see that I've lost a total of 10.1 pounds in 7 days. So that is shocking. It should be amazing, but there's a little bit of a caveat to that. So is the program working? Yes. Am I happy with losing 10 pounds? Absolutely ecstatic. But the caveat, which is a fairly big caveat, and you can kind of see the trend here, and you can see that the loss is starting to slow after that 1 week. The caveat is a pound of human fat has about 3,200 calories. And I'm taking this on competent sources. I haven't sat down and noshed on a pound of human fat because that would be kind of disgusting.
Richest, creamiest fat in the world. Fat of the land.
And as a relatively large adult male, my daily calorie needs are probably around 2,400 to 2,600 calories. I have checked the box on doing my 500 calorie a day workout every day. So, I'm burning about 3,000 calories a day with my workout and just, living and moving and kind of doing general human activities. Even if I was eating absolutely nothing for those 7 days, the absolute maximum I could lose is a little less than a pound of fat per day. So assuming I was operating in those, absolute starvation conditions and still able to put out a 500 plus calorie workout every day, the maximum amount of fat I could have lost is 7 pounds. So how the heck did I lose 10.1 pounds? I think there's a couple factors at play here. Number one, generally when you change your diet relatively drastically, if you've been eating a crappy American diet, which is full of sodium, you're retaining a bit of water. So you got a couple or 3 pounds of water that you just kind of naturally lose by virtue of not rocking cheeseburgers.
Hello, everybody. Thanks a lot for coming out to the cheeseburger picnic. I just want to remind everyone that it's only one cheeseburger per park resident.
Second factor, and again, I'm taking this on reliable sources versus any kind of experimentation I've done myself. What I've heard is you have between 10 and 25 pounds of, for lack of a better phrase, future poop floating around between food that's currently being digested, food that's sort of in your intestinal tract and making its way towards its ultimate exit. And by virtue of switching up my diet and going to a lower calorie diet and something with a little more fiber and roughage, some portion of those 10 to 25 pounds are included in that 10.1. And then obviously there is some fat loss. There's also some muscle loss. I've heard that you can actually lose some bone if you're on a severely calorie restricted diet. Hopefully I'm not losing any bone, but that kind of explains how I got to 10.1 pounds. If I had to guess, and this is kind of pure speculation on my part, maybe pound or two of that is fat and the rest is, all those things I just ran off. The one thing I have experienced during this first week that could be due to kind of the fewer calories I'm intaking is I've been a little bit lethargic. And particularly when I run, I can usually run, my sort of base pace is around a 9-ish minute mile. So when I go out for just sort of a cruise run, I'm generally running a 9:30, and I can do that without any thought, without any huffing or puffing, and that's kind of my conversational pace. It's been a struggle to hit that 9:30-10 on my last few runs. And I don't know if that's a lack of glycogen and sort of sugar floating around my body, which it's used to. I don't know if that's the change in the diet, or I don't know if it's the fact that I managed to pick up COVID the first week of January and have been continuing to work out and diet and do all this stuff with a little bout of COVID that worked its way out in a couple or 3 days. So it wasn't that bad, but maybe there's some residual effects there. So that's the week 1 summary. Look forward to, in the next couple or 3 seconds, the week 2 summary. All right, just wrapped up week 2. Let's put the stats up on the screen and I'll give you a little commentary. So kind of a good news, bad news sort of week. The rate of my weight loss slowed down a bit. I think it's heading a little bit more towards a normal level. slightly frustrating, although, a couple plus or minus 1 to 2 pounds is pretty normal for the average human. All depends on when you ate, what your body's doing, how much water you've had, all sorts of myriad factors. That's why I personally advocate weighing yourself every day, so you can follow that moving average and let that kind of be your guide for how you're progressing. And my moving average has plateaued a little bit. I've gotten stuck at this 100 kilo / 220 pound mark the last couple times I've tried to streamline myself. So hoping I'll smash through there. On the good news front, I'm feeling a little better working out. I don't feel totally zapped. Although what's interesting is my heart rate seems to be a little lower for a particular effort level, but I feel like I'm physically exerting myself more at that level. So to translate that in running terms, a sort of all day pace for me on the roads is about 10 minutes. Usually feel pretty comfortable rocking at 10 minutes, and my heart's usually around a 160-ish. Last few workouts I've done, my heart's been around like a 153, 154-ish, but I've felt a lot more gassed putting out that level of effort. So that's been kind of interesting. You can see the results on the screen. I'm pretty pumped about dropping 10 pounds plus relatively easily. I'm feeling much better. I would say I don't really feel like I'm making a ton of sacrifices so far. The meals are pretty good. I'll talk more about food with my update next week, but I have been able to maintain my 500 calorie a day workout benchmark. I try and alternate between hard workouts or longer workouts and, sort of a quasi recovery day where I'll do a slow spin on the bike. And that's been working reasonably well, and it all feels like something that's maintainable at this point. So far so good, and look forward to seeing you next week. All right, week 3, here we are, the penultimate week in my adventure. Let's cue the stats. So as you can see, not a ton of change in my weight from week 2, probably down net about a pound. My weight's bounced up and down. I had a low where I notched into the 218s, popped back up a couple pounds. It's been a little bit frustrating, quite frankly, but this is where following your moving average comes in, and my moving average is still rolling down. It's gone down to a more normalized rate of a bit below 2 pounds. So, that's about the max that the people in the know say you can lose in terms of healthy fat loss in a week. So in terms of overall health and well-being, I think my body is fully adapted to what's obviously reduced calorie load, a little bit of a different mix of carbs and fat and protein and that stuff going in, feeling much better. I'm able to execute my typical runs, cycling, all that stuff without any real challenges, and feeling pretty good about that. I'm still keeping up with the daily minimum 500 calorie burn workouts and managing to stay fairly recovered, even having done a few longer, hour, 90-minute-ish kind of runs during the process. I did want to briefly touch on diet this week, since I think that's a key to any kind of weight loss program. The old quip is that you can't outrun a bad diet, meaning, you can't exercise your way into weight loss and health if your diet totally sucks. And, my diet pretty much has historically totally sucked. So I'm doing this E2M program that's Echo to Mike. I'll put a link to it down in the show notes. I have no affiliation whatsoever with them. I don't think they're a pyramid scheme like a lot of these weight loss things are, where you have to buy, mixes and powders and buy chickens that you sacrifice to some weird weight loss god. In this case, it's all done through a Facebook group. I really don't participate that much in that. That's just how they deliver their stuff. Essentially, I'm, totally or 95% ignorant of the program and how it works, and have just let her tell me, here's what you eat. And she's given me this weekly sheet they put out that kind of tells you which foods are allowed that particular week and which foods are verboten. I won't show that sheet because they write, proprietary confidential all over that and get paid for it, but there's nothing revolutionary in the eating program. If you read through it, it's all stuff you've probably seen before. I don't think I'm giving away any grand secrets when I say that it's essentially taking out a lot of refined foods. It's taking out refined sugars. It's taking out booze for the most part, and it's incorporating intermittent fasting, which is something I've used in the past. If you're not familiar, that essentially means only eating during a defined window. In my case, that's 12 to 8. So, I wake up, I don't have breakfast, and at noon I have a reasonably sized meal. Typically after working out, I'll have a reasonably sized dinner around 6 or 7 that fits within these E2M parameters. And then I'll have some sort of snacky poo somewhere in between, and that's kind of it. So, if you're looking for something to try that involves minimal effort and minimal thought, intermittent fasting isn't a bad idea, since it's basically just restricting your eating to a defined time period. And I've had okay luck in the past without, changing what I ate or, changing really anything, but just restricting myself to that 12 to 8 period. The only time that I've found that that doesn't really work is sometimes you're just packing yourself full of grub from that 12 to 8 period. So, you tend to be a little hungry around noon, and then you rock, half a box of Cheez-Its and a double cheeseburger and, a side of fries or whatever by one, you just jammed in 1,800 calories and have blown through most of your needs as a typical human being in an hour or two. So don't follow that program and expect that to work. I also had my first, minor road trip during the week, which, wasn't necessarily a work trip, but had a lot of the parameters of a typical work trip for me, in that I was going somewhere away from home, in this case, driving, staying in a hotel, all that stuff. The way I mitigated any restaurant-related challenges was my wife basically helped me pack some, measured portions in little Tupperware containers. My hotel had a microwave. I was able to microwave stuff and, stay compliant within the confines of the plan without any problems. I think if I was flying somewhere, obviously I'm not going to bring a cooler with little Tupperware packages or anything like that. I think there's ways to eat at restaurants and eat in a fairly reasonable fashion, but since I was going somewhere a little bit out of the way, didn't have as many options, wanted to kind of keep things under control and managed, especially when I've only got 1 week left. So once again, I will take 7 days in order to give you some data that you will get in about 30 seconds. But this is the last week on the plan. I think the only major changes I'll make once I wrap up, and I'll talk more and give you a little summary next week, is I think I'll be starting to add some more carbs back into my diet. I've got some big runs coming up, and generally find myself performing best when I'm running off of carbs in those type of events. And obviously I'll go back to having the occasional drink.
Not only is the liquor a powerful entity, it is an irresistible force. It is all-knowing. It is all-loving. Talking to the liquor, it is like talking to God.
Probably going to try and keep that to once a week, just to keep things reasonable and try not to go out and have a big blowout. But who knows if those well-laid plans of mice and men will be executed or will go awry. So cue the clock, and I'll see you in a week. All right, so if week 3 was kind of the week where my weight loss plateaued, stalled out, my body just decided it really liked jamming at around 100 kilos. Week 4, it apparently remembered how to lose weight again. So I'll throw up the graph from Happy Scale again, just so you can kind of see what I mean. There was a bit of a big decline at the start of week 3-ish, end of week 2-ish, I think. And then a big bounce in the opposite direction, just kind of hung out there. And then probably about 5 days ago, my body started shedding weight again on the order of tenths of a pound a day, which is pretty exciting. My average overall rate these last couple weeks is still around 2 pounds, so that's pretty healthy, and what the people that know about this stuff kind of say is acceptable. So the short summary of week 4 is I'm pretty happy. And I'll throw up the stats. You can see there's been a pretty significant loss. I'm about 5-ish pounds away from my goal weight, which I'm really excited about. This doesn't, obviously look like one of those miraculous pictures from those ridiculous diet advertisements where in 30 days somebody goes from a rotund, doughy physique to a, Schwarzenegger grade muscled physique. But I think it's pretty noticeable that, yes, my gut's gotten a little smaller, not suffering from dicky do anymore. Arguably maybe my upper body has gotten a little more toned through the push-up extravaganza. And just overall, I'm feeling a lot better. I'm not laying awake at night kind of feeling bloated and sort of gross. Don't get that feeling during the day. When I do eat meals, they generally are satisfying and I feel pretty good. Still have a little bit of, waking up in the morning, feeling a little bit lethargic. And, at the end of the day, that's most likely due to the fact that I'm still eating fewer calories than I'm consuming. Now, I'm a big believer that that's kind of the immutable law of weight loss, that you have to consume fewer calories than you take in. All the pills and magic shakes and stuff in the world aren't going to change that basic fact of life. And I used to believe, and there's an argument out there that says, hey, as long as you're taking in fewer calories, doesn't matter if you're rocking out with pizza and beer or cheeseburgers or, bags of pure uncut sugar, whatever it is, as long as you're below your calorie needs, you're going to lose weight. And, I still think that's a fundamental truth. Obviously, if you consume less than your body needs, you're going to dip into your fat stores. But I do think conversely, what you put into the machine matters to some extent. At a basic level, if you eat a head of lettuce versus, the equivalent number of tablespoons of sugar, the lettuce is going to make you feel a little more full. It's going to make you feel satiated for a while. It's going to theoretically up the glucose in your bloodstream at a more consistent rate versus the sugar sort of rocket fuel. It's going to give you a spike, and then you might have a little bit of associated crash. So I don't get religious about that sort of argument to the point where, I'm going to go vegan or, eat some crazy extreme diet. But I think the way I've been eating has been, the stuff that any doctor would tell you is probably a good thing. More veggies, more fruits, fewer refined carbs, managed fat intake, lower refined sugar, all that stuff. So looking back on this whole experiment, am I happy that I did it? Absolutely. Was it challenging? I think the first week or two was probably the hardest part. There were a few days that first week where kind of felt just like butt, for lack of a better way of describing it. I felt lethargic, felt like I had sort of a low-end headache. When I was exercising, just felt like I had, no gas in the tank. If you've ever, run or done some sort of sport where you're able to kind of go from a steady state to, a little bit of explosive energy, like going up a hill or something like that, I just felt like I totally lacked that explosive capability. It was sort of like a car with a 6-speed transmission where I couldn't get out of third. Now I feel less of that. I still don't feel like I've got kind of the carbohydrate driven power to go and do sprints for 45 minutes, which I could do on, a typical kind of carb focused diet. But I can go and run for 90 minutes and feel relatively reasonable throughout the run as well as after. I'm obviously super satisfied with the results. I think the weight loss exceeded my expectations in terms of just the sheer amount of weight that I've lost. 15 pounds is nothing to shake a stick at. Obviously, I was starting around 230, so I had plenty of wiggle room there. If you're a 150 pound, 6-foot tall human, you're probably not going to be able to have similar results no matter what you do, short of cutting off your arm or something like that. The no booze thing, I've done that a few times before. I didn't really find that to be a problem, other than one element of this eating plan is having a, I think they call it a celebration meal or a cheat meal or whatever you want to call that. Generally, my wife and I kind of made that a date night. So we go out and eat some pasta or something with cheese or something that combines multiple of the forbidden fruits from the E2M eating plan. And she would have a cocktail and a glass of wine. And, I kind of missed a nice glass of wine with a good meal and good company. So I think tomorrow when I kind of break the proverbial seal, I'm going to rock a nice cab or something like that. I have a few in the wine fridge that I've been waiting to get into. So that'll be a nice reward for the end of this 4-week experiment. Now, in terms of what the future holds, I'm definitely not going back to the typical garbage American diet. I would imagine if I did that immediately, I'd probably stack on 5-6 pounds just right out of the gate. And I would imagine in a couple months, I would undo the hard work that I accomplished over this month. So I don't know that I can stick to kind of the exact numbers of this diet plan. I think I will maintain the intermittent fasting. I will maintain the reduced carb intake, reduced sugar intake. I think I'll add a little bit of, complex carbs back in just to get a little bit more calories in my diet and to get a little bit more of that explosive energy for my runs. I kind of like, and I think I'll maintain that idea of having that one meal a week where you get to go and break the rules a little bit. What was interesting to me is on like the second or third meal, both my wife and I commented about halfway through that, wow, we feel really full and, this was good and delicious and rich, but can't finish the whole thing. And it would be a meal I would, typically finish without question in the past. So that was kind of nice to be able to enjoy something and, have a little room for dessert. And then, in one case, the next day, I felt kind of gross and a little bit bloated and things like that. And the whole cheat meal wasn't as dramatic and wonderful as I thought it would be. So that kind of builds the case for sticking with some of the more natural or unprocessed foods or whatever you want to call it. So I would heartily recommend some type of experiment like this. I think I said in the beginning, the way I'm wired is that I need to do something dramatic and ridiculous and put all sorts of parameters out there. And, I'm the equivalent. Even though I've never smoked, I would imagine I'd be the equivalent of the person that has to go cold turkey versus, chewing gums or trying to make some gradual change in order for it to work. This was kind of my equivalent to going cold turkey. I think it worked pretty well. I think I've built some habits and techniques I'm going to carry forward. And if you're wired in a similar way, I would suggest, doing some variant of your own Joe Rogan style sober October or dry January or whatever you want to call it. And just figure out how you want to combine those elements of changing what you eat, maybe changing how you work out, or, either upping volume or trying to be more consistent. And ideally, I think another secret weapon for me through all of this was doing the same eating plan with my wife. So, having a buddy that not only I could talk with and say, hey, I feel like ass today. How do you feel? Are you feeling better this morning? And, kind of sharing the food and all that stuff. We continued to make kind of normal food for our kids that our kids like, and being able to have my wife and I have one dinner, and then the kids have their, traditional standard American dinner, worked better, I think, than, if one person in the family, either myself or my wife, was kind of doing this on our own and having to fly solo while everyone else was rocking out with, burgers and fries and that sort of thing. So that's it for the Joe Rogan style sober October, but in January experiment. If you have any questions, throw them down in the comments. And if there are enough, I will either do another video and try and answer your questions, or I'll just do another video and make up a bunch of questions and pretend they came from my massive and fantastic fan base, but try and get some more inspiration, ideas, and tips and tricks in there in case you want to try this for yourself. So with that, this is the slightly less big heavy wishing you well in whatever endeavors you pursue, whether it's health, happiness, or otherwise, and wishing you peace. Ever wonder why every talking head on YouTube asks you to hit the like and subscribe button at the end of their video? You were right, because we're living in a computer simulation. And our benevolent robotic overlords get just a little bit of energy every time you hit that like. So do me, the rest of civilization, and our benevolent robotic overlords a favor. Mash that subscribe, be kind to each other, keep living your simulated dreams.